Have you ever noticed how the forest falls silent when a wolf appears? It doesn't growl, it doesn't announce itself, it just arrives, and that alone shifts everything. Now think about that in human terms. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, silence is no longer weakness, it's power, it's control, and those who master it command attention without ever needing to demand it. You see, real strength doesn't come from noise. It doesn't come from over-explaining, defending yourself, or proving a point. It comes from what's not said, from the stillness inside you when the world is trying to shake you. We live in a time where the loudest often seem the most confident. But the truth, the most dangerous man in the room is rarely the loudest. He's the one who doesn't flinch, the one who watches, the one who says nothing but knows everything. Because silence, when grounded in self-control, becomes a strategic force. It unsettles, it disarms, it demands attention without ever asking for it. Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone walked into a room and said absolutely nothing, yet somehow everyone noticed them? That's not charisma, that's presence. And presence doesn't come from ego. It comes from mastering your internal state, your breath, your posture, your energy. This is what the ancient Stoics understood better than most. They didn't shout to be respected. They didn't chase applause. They focused on mastering themselves first, because once you've done that, the world begins to shift around you. So before we dive into the practical tools and mental frameworks of how to build this presence, let's set one thing straight. You don't need to raise your voice to be powerful. You don't need to bark to be respected. You just need to show up with stillness, and the world will fall silent. Welcome to a different kind of strength. Welcome to the philosophy of quiet dominance. Let me tell you something that changed my life. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Now think about that for a second. How much of your life is spent trying to change what's out there, other people, situations, the weather, your boss, your partner? But the truth is, the battlefield has never been out there. It's always been in here. Inside your mind, inside your reactions, inside your breath when things go wrong. You see, the moment you lose control of your emotions, you hand over your power. Someone insults you and you snap. Someone doubts you and you overcompensate. Someone ignores you and suddenly your self-worth feels shaken. That's not strength, that's slavery. Because when your inner world depends on how the outer world treats you, you've already lost. Now contrast that with someone who's mastered himself. He doesn't flinch when tension walks in. He doesn't rush to fill silence with words. He doesn't chase approval with loud opinions or emotional outbursts. Instead, he sits, he breathes, he sees everything and reacts to nothing. That is presence, not just being physically in the room, but radiating a kind of energy that says, "I'm grounded, I'm alert, and I'm not here to prove anything." Have you ever met someone like that? They don't talk much, but when they do, people listen. Not because their words are louder, but because they carry weight. That weight doesn't come from ego. It comes from discipline, from restraint, from hours spent confronting their own chaos instead of throwing it at others. In a world addicted to reaction, this kind of stillness is rare, and rare is powerful. So if you're wondering how to command respect, how to walk into a room and shift the energy without saying a word, it starts with one thing: master yourself, your posture, your breath, your inner weather. Because until you can do that, the world will always control you. But the moment you choose response over reaction, you begin to take your power back, one silent breath at a time. And that's not just stoicism, that's freedom. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to provoke you? A subtle jab, a sarcastic comment, a backhanded compliment. What did you do? Most people, without thinking, fire back. They defend themselves. They raise their voices. They try to win the moment. But here's the truth. When you react immediately, you're not in control. You're playing someone else's game. The Stoics saw this clearly. They understood that when someone tries to offend you, it's not really about you. It's about them, their insecurity, their need for attention, their internal chaos. And that's exactly why silence is so powerful, because silence flips the mirror. It makes the other person confront their own behavior without you having to say a word. Think about it. You're in a room. Tension rises. Someone throws a verbal punch your way, trying to see if they can shake you, but instead of reacting, you pause. You look at them calm, maybe with the faintest trace of a smile, and you say, "Nothing. Now who's uncomfortable? Now who's in control?" You've just taken the power dynamic and flipped it upside down without even opening your mouth. That's the power of non-reaction. Let me share a real-world example. There was a senior executive at a major corporation who was known for one thing. He was always the last person to speak in every meeting. He wasn't silent because he had nothing to say. He was silent because he was watching, observing, calculating, letting everyone reveal their cards. And when he finally did speak, the entire room went quiet. Not out of fear, but out of respect, because his words meant something, and they meant something because he didn't waste them. Silence gave his voice weight. That's what happens when you stop reacting and start choosing. And look, I get it. Staying calm when someone's pushing your buttons isn't easy, especially when pride gets involved. When you feel disrespected. But here's the paradox. The louder your reaction, the more power you give away. And the quieter your presence, the more power you command. Non-reaction doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've evolved beyond the need to win petty battles. You're not interested in proving your worth. You've already decided who you are. That's where real strength comes from, not from dominating the room, but from refusing to be dominated by it. So next time someone tries to bait, you remember this: silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. It's strength. It's the ultimate flex in a world that's forgotten how to pause. Be like the man who doesn't need to bark to be respected. Be like the leader whose words land because his silence speaks first. Because in a world full of noise, stillness is unforgettable. Let's talk about something that often goes unnoticed, but never unfelt. Stillness. Not the kind of stillness that comes from exhaustion or apathy. I'm talking about intentional stillness. The calm you choose, the breath you control, the pause you master before the world rushes you into a reaction. The Stoics had a word for it: ataraxia, a state of unshakable inner peace. Not the kind you find on a beach vacation, but the kind you cultivate in the middle of storms. It's not about being passive. It's not about detaching from life. It's about training yourself through discipline, through awareness, to stay centered no matter what's collapsing around you. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you sat in silence and felt completely anchored? No scrolling, no rushing, just you, your breath, and the present moment. Most people can't even sit still for 60 seconds without reaching for a distraction. That's not a judgment, it's a sign of how overstimulated we've become. But here's the thing. In a world that's constantly speeding up, the man who can slow down becomes powerful. Because stillness isn't emptiness. Stillness is presence. It's your ability to hold yourself together when life tries to pull you apart. And it's not just mental, it's physical. Your breath, when it's deep and steady, it grounds you. It sends signals to your nervous system that you're safe, even when your environment says otherwise. Your posture, when it's upright but relaxed, it tells the room, I'm not here to perform. I'm here because I belong. Your gaze, when it's calm, not aggressive, not evasive, but intentional, it says, I see you, and I see myself. I don't need to prove anything, all of that, without saying a word. That's the kind of strength people feel before you even open your mouth. You don't need to dominate conversations. You don't need to constantly be on. You just need to walk into a room with the kind of calm that makes people pause, not because you're loud, but because your energy is undeniable. Stillness is magnetic. It makes people wonder what you know. It makes them curious about how you're so composed in chaos. And more importantly, it keeps you in control, because when you master stillness, you master choice. You're no longer reacting out of fear, anger, or pride. You're responding from clarity, and that is rare. So the next time you feel the urge to rush, to explain, to defend, pause. Return to your breath. Let your eyes speak what words can't. And remember, the calmest man in the room doesn't need to shout. He already owns the space. Let's talk about communication, the kind that doesn't use words. Because sometimes, it's not what you say that speaks the loudest. It's how you enter a room. It's how you hold your posture. And it's where your eyes go or don't. We've all seen it. The person who avoids eye contact fidgets in their seat or walks in like they're apologizing for existing. And on the other end, there's the overcompensator. Loud, overly assertive, trying way too hard to control the room with dominance and ego. Both are extremes. Both come from insecurity. But then there's the rare third type. The one who walks in calm, not trying to be seen but still gets noticed, not seeking approval but still earns respect. That's the Stoic. And the way he communicates without words, that's his secret weapon. Let's start with eye contact. An anxious person avoids it. A confrontational person stares too hard. But the Stoic, he holds it just long enough. He meets your gaze with awareness, neither backing down nor pushing forward. Just present, just grounded. His eyes don't say, "Fear me" or "Please like me." They say, "I see you, and I see myself." Clearly, that's power. Next, posture. Think about how most people carry themselves in public. Slouched, tense shoulders up around their ears, constantly adjusting and twitching. Now picture someone walking into a room, upright but relaxed steps, deliberate head, still shoulders open. They're not performing, they're simply centered. And that stillness, it has gravity. It pulls attention without asking for it. That's what presence looks like. And presence, my friend, is not loud. It's felt. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a room and someone walked in, said nothing, but everyone turned to look? You couldn't quite explain why. They weren't flashy. They didn't make a scene. But their presence filled the space. That's the effect of aligned energy. That's what happens when your body language matches your internal calm. And here's the key. It doesn't come from faking confidence. It comes from building it, from doing the inner work, from becoming someone who doesn't need approval to feel complete. A Stoic doesn't enter a room to impress people. He enters with stillness and lets the silence speak for him. His very presence becomes a quiet declaration, "I'm not here to compete. I'm here to observe, to understand, to stand firm in who I am." And in a world full of noise, that kind of presence, it's rare, it's magnetic, and it's unforgettable. So next time you walk into a room, don't try to control it. Just control yourself. Because when your gaze is steady, when your steps are calm, and when your spirit doesn't chase validation, you don't just walk into a room, you shift it. Let me tell you something most people never realize until it's too late. The most powerful person in the room is often the hardest to figure out. We live in a world where everyone overshares. Everyone wants to be seen, heard, understood, validated. They tell you their plans. They expose their emotions. They react to everything. But the man who says little, the man who doesn't rush to explain himself, he becomes a mystery. And mystery, my friend, that's magnetic. It pulls people in without effort, because when people don't know what you're thinking, they can't predict your next move. When they can't predict you, they can't control you. That's why being unpredictable is one of the most underrated forms of strength. Let's be clear, this isn't about being emotionally distant or cold. It's about becoming intentional with your energy, choosing when to speak, when to act, when to hold back. It's a strategy, not a personality trait. Imagine this. You're in a meeting. Someone takes a cheap shot at you hoping you'll react. Most people would immediately jump to defend themselves, get flustered, talk too much, or get angry. But you pause, you breathe, and you say nothing. That silence, that unreadable response, it throws everything off. Now they're the ones questioning themselves. Now they feel exposed, because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you're watching. It means you're gathering data, reading the room, picking up what's not being said. That's something the Stoics understood deeply. Power isn't just about how loudly you speak. It's about how much control you have when others expect you to lose it. People fear what they don't understand, and they respect what they can't shake. You don't have to intimidate people to earn respect. You just have to become someone who isn't easily figured out, someone who can't be emotionally cornered, someone whose presence speaks louder than their words. And the only way to become that person is to stop giving the world so much access to your inner world. When you hold back just enough, when you don't explain every emotion, every move, every opinion, you become less reactive and more reflective. You watch before you speak. You calculate before you act. You let others show their hand while you quietly study the game. And in doing so, you shift the balance of power without even trying, because unpredictability, when rooted in calm self-mastery, isn't chaos, it's control. So next time you're tempted to explain yourself, pause. Next time someone tries to bait you, breathe. And the next time you feel the need to be understood, ask yourself, what's more powerful right now, being known or being remembered? Because in a world addicted to noise, the man who stays quiet becomes unforgettable. Let me ask you something personal. How many times have you been baited into an argument you didn't even care about? Someone throws a jab, makes a passive-aggressive comment, or tries to test your patience, and before you know it, you're deep in a reaction you didn't choose, frustrated, defensive, off balance. Now pause and ask yourself, who was really in control in that moment? Because here's the hard truth. Every time you react automatically, emotionally, without thinking, you're no longer playing your game. You're playing theirs, and they know it. That's why one of the most underrated forms of power is restraint. The ability to observe without engaging, to hear without absorbing, to witness nonsense and let it pass like wind through an open window. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You always retain the right to have no opinion." Let that sink in. You are not obligated to comment, to defend, to prove, or to participate in every emotional invitation that comes your way. You don't have to respond to every insult. You don't have to correct every misunderstanding. You don't even have to set the record straight. Because the moment you take the bait, you've already stepped into someone else's emotional battlefield. And now they control the rules. But the Stoic knows better. He watches, he studies, and when provoked, he doesn't retaliate. He doesn't shout. He doesn't scramble to be understood. Instead, he offers a calm pause, a quiet smile, or nothing at all. Why? Because silence is disarming. It forces people to reflect on their own behavior instead of escalating yours. And more than that, it keeps you anchored in your own center. Let's say someone says something that would have triggered the old you, but now you breathe. You shift your focus inward. You remind yourself, I don't have to attend every argument I'm invited to. Suddenly you're in control, not just of the situation, but of yourself. That's real power, because the one who doesn't react, he's unpredictable, he's unreadable, and therefore he can't be manipulated. So the next time someone tries to pull you into drama, conflict, or ego games, just smile, or don't, say nothing, or something short and steady. But whatever you do, don't hand them your energy. Stay above the game, not out of pride, but out of principle. Because when you no longer need to win every exchange, you start winning the bigger one, the one where you choose peace over ego, clarity over chaos, and power over reaction. Let me ask you something that might hit close to home. How often do you find yourself over-explaining, trying to justify your actions, your decisions, even your silence, just so others will understand? And how often do you vent, frustrated, misunderstood, needing to let it all out? Now here's the truth that most people don't want to hear. The more you explain, the more power you give away. The more you complain, the more fragile you appear. Why? Because both are rooted in the same thing, a craving for external validation. When you feel the need to explain yourself to everyone, what you're really saying is, please accept me. Please understand me. Please don't judge me. And when you complain, whether it's about a person, a situation, or the unfairness of life, what you're signaling is, I'm not in control of this. Something out there has power over me. But the Stoic, he moves differently. He doesn't rush to be understood. He doesn't perform for approval. He lets results speak on his behalf. There's a quiet confidence in that, a deep inner strength that doesn't need to be broadcast. You see, Marcus Aurelius, one of the wisest emperors in history, once said, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. In other words, stop trying to prove your worth. Live it. Think about it. When someone wrongs you, maybe they undermine you at work, discredit your ideas, or disrespect you in front of others, what do you want to do? The urge is strong, right? You want to defend yourself. You want to explain. You want to be seen for who you really are. But here's the twist. The more you fight to be seen, the less powerful you become. The Stoic doesn't chase that fight. He channels it. He takes the energy others waste on proving, explaining, complaining, and he puts it into building. Building his craft, his consistency, his results. Because in the end, your actions will always be louder than your voice. So the next time you feel tempted to clarify your every move, pause. Ask yourself, am I explaining this because it truly adds value or because I want to be accepted? And the next time you feel the urge to complain, ask, will this make me stronger or smaller? Because here's the truth. The most powerful people aren't the ones who are constantly talking. They're the ones who act with clarity, walk with purpose, and never beg to be seen. They don't need to be loud because their silence is filled with results. They don't need to be validated because they validate themselves. They don't need to explain because those who matter already know, and those who don't, let them wonder. Let's get something clear right away. Silence isn't about bottling things up. It's not about pretending everything's fine, and it's definitely not about swallowing pain while smiling on the outside. True silence is not suppression. It's transformation. It's a choice, a redirection of energy. It's the decision to take every insult, every betrayal, every act of disrespect and turn it into fuel. You see, when someone wrongs you, talks behind your back, steals your idea, undercuts your effort, it's easy to react, to vent, to make a scene, to demand justice in the moment. But the Stoic, he doesn't move like that. He doesn't waste energy playing the short game. He's playing a deeper, longer, more powerful one. He channels the sting inward quietly, deliberately, not to bury it, but to build something better from it. Let me paint the picture for you. You're in a workplace meeting. You pitch an idea. It's solid. You know it is. But someone more senior subtly discredits you. You feel it, the slight, the disrespect, the urge to fire back. But instead, you don't. You take a breath. You let it go. On the surface, because deep down you're already turning that moment into motivation. You're already thinking, all right, watch what I do next. And then later, when no one's watching you work, you study, you refine, you prepare, You execute with such undeniable excellence that the next time you present, they won't just hear you, they'll feel the shift. That's how you turn silence into strategy. Because the truth is, people don't fear noise. They fear calm clarity. They fear the one who didn't lash out, didn't cry for sympathy, didn't make it personal, but instead disappeared for a while and came back stronger. That's unsettling. That's powerful. Because the one who quietly transforms instead of reacts becomes a different kind of threat. Not emotional, not loud, just precise, consistent, inevitable. And that's what Stoicism teaches us. Not to suppress our fire, but to forge something from it. You don't need to prove anything in the moment. You don't need to defend yourself with words. You let your discipline speak. You let your results speak. You let your silence become a storm that no one saw coming. So the next time someone underestimates you, don't waste your breath. Let your moves whisper louder than their noise, because nothing haunts a person more than the quiet one they tried to bury only to watch him rise. There's something most people don't understand about influence. It's not always about being present. It's not always about showing up, speaking up, or taking the spotlight. Sometimes the real power is in knowing when to disappear, when to step back just far enough to leave a ripple behind. The Stoics understood this deeply. They weren't obsessed with always being seen or heard. They knew the value of restraint, of absence, of leaving something unfinished. Because here's a secret: what's incomplete is what lingers. What's unsaid is what echoes. And what's missing is what keeps people thinking. Let me give you an example. Have you ever been in a conversation that ended abruptly? Someone said something, maybe not dramatic, but meaningful. And then they left. No long explanation, no follow-up, just a moment and then silence. You didn't forget that conversation, did you? You replayed it, you analyzed it, you asked yourself what it meant. Because our minds hate unfinished loops. We crave closure. And when we don't get it, the memory burns itself in. The Stoic uses that psychology not manipulatively, but intentionally. He knows that sometimes disappearing at the right moment is more powerful than staying to explain. In a world addicted to constant presence online, in meetings, in relationships, very few understand the power of absence. But think about it. The people you often miss the most, aren't they the ones who didn't overstay? The ones who left quietly, who didn't explain themselves, who walked away with calm clarity. That's not coldness. That's presence elevated by timing. The Stoic doesn't disappear to punish. He disappears to preserve. He understands that his energy is not meant to be spent in constant exposure. He shows up with intention. He speaks with precision. And when the moment peaks, he leaves. Not dramatically, not angrily, but intentionally. And that exit, that space he leaves behind, it becomes a kind of quiet mirror that forces others to reflect. It makes people think, what was he really saying? Why did he go silent? What does he know that I don't? And suddenly, the mystery grows. You see, the loudest person in the room often fades the fastest, but the one who knows when to step back, who leaves just enough unsaid, that's the person you remember days, weeks, even years later. Here's a practical takeaway. In your conversations, don't always aim to close the loop. Leave a little space. Say what matters, and then stop. Walk away with grace. End on a note that invites thought, not applause. Because when you create just enough tension, just enough curiosity, people can't help but feel your absence. And in that absence, your presence becomes bigger than when you were there. Think of it like this. The Stoic doesn't leave to escape. He leaves to expand. He doesn't need the last word because his last action spoke louder. He doesn't need to explain because the silence after him says more than 1,000 explanations ever could. So if you want to be remembered, if you want to leave a mark that goes beyond noise, learn this ancient principle. Be strategic with your presence and unforgettable in your absence. There's a quiet truth that takes most people a lifetime to learn. You don't need to be understood. You just need to be solid within yourself. Let that settle for a second, because for most of us, the instinct to explain, to justify, to be seen, to be validated is strong, especially when we feel misjudged, overlooked, or underestimated. We want people to get us, to see our side, to know our intent, to believe the best about us. But here's what that desire often hides: a subtle insecurity. Because if your sense of peace depends on someone else's understanding, then your peace was never truly yours to begin with. The Stoics understood this on a deep level. They weren't driven by the need to be understood. They were driven by the need to be centered. Because being grounded in who you are, your values, your discipline, your direction is far more powerful than being liked, praised, or even accepted. Let me ask you this. Have you ever walked away from a conversation thinking, I should have said more, I should have explained myself better? And then you replay it a dozen times in your head. That's not clarity, that's self-doubt disguised as reflection. Now think about the moments when you chose to stay calm, when you said less, not because you were weak, but because you were anchored. How did that feel? Because here's what you'll notice. The more grounded you are, the less explaining you need to do. Your energy speaks, your consistency speaks, your results speak, and more importantly, your silence speaks volumes. When someone pushes you to explain yourself, when they twist your words or misunderstand your actions, your instinct might be to defend. But pause and ask yourself, am I explaining because it adds clarity, or because I feel emotionally exposed? Because often the most composed person in the room is the one who can sit with misunderstanding and not let it unravel them. That's not arrogance, that's mastery. It's the understanding that not everyone needs access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves a backstage pass to your thoughts, your motives, or your heart. Sometimes letting people misunderstand you and staying calm anyway is the real power move. Because people who always need to be understood are still trying to prove something. But those who have nothing to prove don't chase understanding, they radiate stability. You don't need to over-communicate. You don't need to win every narrative. You don't need to be approved to be aligned. You just need to be deeply, quietly sure of who you are. And that certainty, it doesn't come from talking. It comes from living, from aligning your actions with your values, from knowing that truth doesn't need an audience to be true. So the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, stop. Ask yourself, would silence show more strength? Would walking away grounded speak louder than trying to be understood? Because the Stoic knows the more solid your foundation, the less noise you need to make. And in a world where everyone's busy shouting to be heard, the one who doesn't need to speak is the one who gets remembered. At the end of the day, the world will remember not the one who talked the most, but the one who carried themselves with quiet strength. The Stoic doesn't need to raise his voice to be heard. He doesn't chase the spotlight or argue to prove a point. He shows up when it matters and lets his presence do the talking, because real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to fight for attention. It arrives calm, steady, and unshakable, and the room adjusts around it. So let me leave you with this. Don't worry about being seen. Focus on being solid. Don't aim to impress. Aim to align. And don't try to control every moment. Just show up with clarity when it counts. Because when your energy is real, when your actions are aligned, and when your silence is grounded in self-mastery, you don't have to say a word. People will feel you long after you're gone. That's the legacy of stillness. That's the quiet influence of the Stoic. Let the world chase noise. You leave an echo.